And welcome to an evening with Aaron Sims Creative here at the Gnomon School of Visual Effects and Animation for Film and Games. We're so lucky to have Aaron Sims, the man himself, here with us tonight. So the founder of Aaron Sims Creative, and the visual creator of some of this generation's most unforgettable cinema creatures. Aaron's works influenced the face of character design across the board, from film, TV, and games to previs and VFX. So I think we should begin with a big round of applause. So the Aaron Sims Creative Studio has made incredible contributions to some of the most critically acclaimed film and TV projects of 2017, including Stranger Things 2, It, Wonder Woman, War of the Planet of the Apes, just to name a few from their impressive resume. Netflix actually revealed a couple of days ago that Stranger Things is one of the top 3 Netflix TV shows that got us cheating in 2017. But it's also, interestingly, the #1 show that brought us together in 2017. So by cheating, we mean that it was so good that most of us went ahead and watched it without waiting for our partners to catch up with us. So we look forward to hearing about how Aaron Sims Creative works its magic to create such irresistible content. So joining Aaron tonight, we're honored to have executive producer Michael Pecchia to Aaron's right? Left? To Aaron's right. Aaron's left. Okay, I'm really dumb. And then we have creative director Steffen Reichstadt. So let's have a big round of applause for Michael and Steffen, please. So Michael and Steffen bring decades of experience with them to the table tonight, and they'll be joining Aaron to present a first look at how Aaron Sims Creative works as a design-heavy visual effects house, working with directors from beginning to end, from concept to visual effects, and then onto our screens. So this is an amazing opportunity for us all to see ASC's everyday process and discover just how unique this studio is in its approach to working with clients. We're also super proud to have Gnomon alumni, many of them that have gone on to work at ASC after graduating from Gnomon School. And tonight we're extra proud to bring 2 of them, ASC artists and Gnomon alums, Erik Keefer and David Olson, to the stage. So they're sitting right here. We'll be embarrassing them a little bit later. And moderating tonight's event, we have Chase Friedman, who brings with him over 10 years of experience as a writer, director, and producer in film, TV, and digital media. So that's super awesome. And he'll be taking the reins in just a moment. Before we get started, I'd just like to give a big shout out to our event sponsor, Lenovo, as you can see over here, whose workstations are used here by students on the Gnomon campus. So a huge thanks to Lenovo for helping us to bring these free industry events to so many people, both here and online as well, so thank you. We have a Q&A session scheduled to wrap up tonight's event, which will be followed by a meet and greet here at the stage. So be sure to raise your hand if you have a question later on, and we'll bring the microphone to you. And hang on to your raffle tickets. We have some cool prizes to give out. So we have this cute water bottle right here. We have the comfiest t-shirt I've ever put my hands on. And then we have a signed Demogorgon print, which has been printed at Aaron Sims Creative. So you definitely want to stay till the end. And those of you on the live stream, I'm sorry, there's no prizes online tonight. But if you do have a question, please submit questions on the live stream live chat, or you can do so on Twitter using #AskGnomon as well. So without further ado, let's have another big round of applause, and we'll hand over to Chase to get the night started. Thank you.
Am I live here? No? Hello? All right. Thank you all for coming out tonight. It's a pleasure to be back at Gnomon and a pleasure to see all of you, and for braving the LA traffic. And for those of you who are live streaming, you don't have to do anything, so thank you for just tuning in on your computers or TV. That's great too. So tonight we're really thrilled to be sharing with you, again, as Lynette said, and of course thank you to Lynette and team at Gnomon. You guys rock. And again, we're proud to be here. So we're going to be showing you our workflow as we describe, from design through visual effects and everything in between, that we call sketch to screen. There's quite a few new things that you're going to be the very first to see this evening, from some of the early designs, some of the early assets, And to kick things off, we're going to give you guys the very first look, the world premiere of our brand new ASC showreel. Enjoy.
Let's go.
Okay.
Nuts!
So yeah, it's been quite a busy year, few years. For those of you who aren't familiar with us, we work primarily, obviously, in television, film, gaming, and beyond. So every year is kind of building new different franchises and platforms and mediums that we're working in, which has been awesome for us. This is just kind of a quick look at some of our previous work, and then something to get excited about coming up in 2018. It's been quite a bit of time over the last year plus on a bunch of these projects. Wrinkle in Time, Rampage, Ready Player One, and Aquaman. So hopefully they'll invite us back sometime next year to share some of these assets as well. I'm going to hand it over to the guys to talk a little bit about what we specialize in as a design and concept design firm. Aaron, take it away.
Yeah, so hopefully a lot of you are familiar with some of these characters: Spider-Man, the Hulk, Turtles. Clash of Titans, and we've had the fortunate ability to be able to work with some of the incredible directors and filmmakers for the last decade, and our company started in 2005, and ever since we've been growing in so many ways. And our strengths are really focuses on characters, but we create the entire range in world creating in the process. Everything from Stranger Things to I Am Legend to Independence Day, some of the concepts up here. We've have luckily been able to do a nice range of different concepts. And, the team of artists, that a lot of them come from Gnomon, that help us, create some of these characters. And, we feel very fortunate to have very incredible talent that comes from this school and help to foster as they grow. And Steffan's been with me for over 10 years. This is his 10-year, actually.
Yeah, 10th year.
Yeah.
And it's been incredible to watch it grow because, like Aaron said, we've always been focused on character stuff, but over the years we've really grown and blossomed into a full-fledged visual effects company and really grown the style of art that we do. and the variation in the kind of art that we do. For instance, we've moved past characters in the first couple of years, and then moved on to key scenes, and started more world building, more world imagining, and a lot of these end up being one-to-one with what happens in the film. Specifically with this one with Spider-Man here, that was a one-to-one. They actually ended up using a lot of that. Same thing with Apes, and the same thing with some of the Independence Day stuff as well.
For those who aren't aware, key scenes, how would you describe that in terms of what we're creating for the director early on in the process?
I mean, the concept is that you end up sitting down with the production designer or the director one-on-one, and you usually end up paging through the script and saying, here's 10 concepts that kind of identify your film. And these are usually the concepts that you start with for pitch packages for them. Because even if they're really big directors, even like Roland Emmerich and Steven Spielberg, they still have to put a pitch package together to go and get their film greenlit. And they usually pull together 15 to 20 images, the script, and a little bit of a teaser trailer they put together themselves to kind of sell it to the studio. And these are usually a part of that. And that's really where we do a lot of our key scene work.
Yeah, I mean, we've, what Steffen had mentioned as far as like helping out with key scenes, and, a lot of times before you do the key scene, you have to create the characters. So the characters are a lot of the first things that we start with, but helping with production, be able to understand what these particular scenes are going to look like and feel like, the mood and everything is very important for everybody that's actually creating the film. So we've, had the great fortune to be able to work with, and on some amazing projects and help them grow.
I think the biggest thing to really emphasize is we're so early on with the director is that we're getting the essence of his film. And a lot of these key scenes or her, correct. A lot of these key scenes are usually put right into the film, and it captures those angles and feeling. And it's their start of their vision. They're putting the edit together in their head when they're building these key scenes. So it's very vital for them. And I know we're always impressed when we see a key scene turn into that exact shot in a film, and it's their way of just stitching it together before they step on the set and really start shooting.
And one of the projects we mentioned previously that we worked on, Rampage, I think it was really cool for some of the artists who are also in the house. We've got a couple other guys, DDA, David, Matt in the back, what's up guys, from ASC, who it's really gratifying as an artist to see when you work on a key scene, and in the Rampage trailer, I think you guys agreed, like some of it was one-to-one, almost precisely exactly how it was imagined and designed in those key scene moments, well before the start of production.
Yeah, not only the key scenes, but the characters themselves.
Right.
Yeah, I think that wolf that Matt did ended up being exactly the one that they ended up just making it an asset. They didn't change it at all.
Yeah, which is another thing that we help with, when we're designing characters, we try to help with every aspect of the film. So when we're designing a character, we give them the asset if they need it, and we actually help supply that with it. The key scenes helped to tell a story and how those characters are going to be portrayed within that story. And so what we do is we try to help the production on every level of it, and that's including world creation, which is some of these images here, which is just they're not necessarily key scenes up here, but they're more the world creation, which is a character in itself, because there's so many different palettes. So you have to bring a character, a world to life, just like you would with a character. So. With our designs, we help with everything, even we get into props and weapons. Here are just some from various projects. Spider-Man, this is Insidious down here. Some stuff from Minority Report, the TV series, vehicles. Luckily we're able to help with every aspect. We feel that when it comes to designing for film, TV, is that every aspect of it is a character, is just as important. And these props and vehicles are, they're very important just as much as the characters are and the world themselves.
So we're going to get into some of the projects we worked on last year, some of which I hope you guys recognize, talking about key scenes and how they match up with the final scene in the film itself. So we're going to kick it off with Wonder Woman, and the first image we're seeing here is Themyscira, right? Is the birthplace of Wonder Woman.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, we've done quite a few different concepts, and one of our artists that's here, Didier, he actually did this piece of art over here that was selected for the film. And you can see the similarity. I mean, they actually, we helped design some of the architecture, the look of the landscape, the levels, and there was, I forget how many, there was like, 20 or 30 different concepts of this island that we created, but this is the one. And a lot of it was, kind of, harking back to some of the Greek mythology, and putting that in. Some of the earlier designs we did were a little too sci-fi for Patty, but this one felt true to what she wanted to tell is the island. So yeah, what we're doing is, we're going to show you as we go, like some of the process of not only these scenes, but this is a key scene that we were designing for this, some of the training on the island with the Amazons. And this was done way before they shot anything.
Well, and I think that's an important note as well, because this lets you realize just how early on some of this is. And a lot of times what will happen is that you'll get into designing these key scenes while they're working on the script as well. So they'll end up having to kind of reimagine certain parts of the script and maybe rewrite certain parts of the script because something that they thought would work doesn't, or you might have stumbled onto a good idea that they kind of run with later on. And that actually happened a lot, and I think we'll come to it soon here as well. But talking about the final scene with the final show-off between Ares and Wonder Woman as well.
What we've noticed too is when we do find a key scene in the film, for me, it totally, I'm amazed that the director had that vision 6 months, 7 months before the shoot, is that they've put that edit together in their head of how they want that look and feel of the film, and then they're just executing when they start filming. It's pretty wild to see that they're putting that together, and we've noticed directors that really have that vision. You'll notice how successful those films are.
So as you can see up here, we've got the kind of iconic beach scene when she first discovers Steve. Can you talk us through the step-by-step process of, what's the first iteration? Obviously on the left, you can see the kind of black and white rough sketch. How many versions of that, how it becomes refined to more like the image on the right, which seems to be closer to the final.
Yeah, so what we always do with key scenes especially is sketch it out in this rough form. And we did many different iterations, different angles, different looks for Wonder Woman at that time. Also what he looked like, what the beach would look like. There was a time where we were, Patty was talking about, this opening in the landscape. You see that kind of cave and stuff. And they didn't really find it here, but a lot of the other aspects of this image came to, pretty one-to-one. A lot of it even was the costumes. The costume itself, we ended up, working with the costume designer and Patty, the director, on what she would be wearing when she is on the beach. This here is the same thing. It shows the progression from a sketch, and this is her first time to New York. So she's only used to her island, and the beauty of that, and goes into this, new territory that is, to her, almost frightening in a lot of ways. And part of what Patty really wanted to get across with this, and you can see it, especially the contrast from what her island was, is it's overgrown, it's populated, it steams everywhere. It feels, kind of messy in some ways. So there's, as far as there's people running around. But you can see how it kind of came together and how close it was, from the key scene.
Yeah, and actually, this one's really interesting to talk about as well. So Patty really dug this, this kind of massive action pose of her, with the bow and arrow and leaping over something and hitting two people at the same time with two arrows from one bow. But she originally wrote it for this scene where she was, fighting the Nazis. But she couldn't really make it work. with the whole bow, and she's fighting a bunch of people with guns. So she ended up using it at a different time earlier on in the film when they're all fighting on the beach. So if you watch back, you can actually see there's a scene where where another Amazonian leaps over a rock and does this exact same move. But it just shows you how things can change and shift. But you'll kind of notice bits and pieces as you walk through the film and as you walk through the creative design process. Things can kind of be organic and develop as you work.
Yeah, and those are things that weren't really written in the script. They were just stuff that, working with the director close and her coming up with ideas and us coming up with ideas, somehow find their way in the film. And either if it's not in that key scene, it's something that's motivated for another scene, which is much like that.
And this is kind of the same thing as well, like this scene where he's kind of forming his armor and he's basically pulling shreds of destroyed tanks and other pieces of stuff from the battlefield. And we ended up trying to design 3 or 4 different ways of his reveal of this guy as Ares, as the actor turning into Ares. Some of them where he was 100 feet tall, some of them where he was ripping from the skin on the inside out. But this is what Patty really liked in the end, and it ended up getting pretty close in the end. It's quite nice, and she really did an amazing job.
Yeah, there was many iterations for this, like Stefan was saying, where Ares was gigantic and huge, but there was something about having two the same size characters fighting each other with almost equal powers, and it became very interesting to see how it all came together after all those different iterations and variations. And that happens a lot in film, where the third act is the most complicated to achieve, just because everything has to kind of come together and make sense, and it has to be as powerful as it can be.
Well, and it has to matter. That's the other thing. The other reason why she ended up choosing this tete-a-tete kind of thing is it made it more personal when it was two people fighting as opposed to her against some massive anonymous force.
In adding, when we're doing the key scenes, as Aaron said, there's numerous versions and styles. It's a lot easier to do key scenes over than when she's on set and trying to figure something out with a film crew of 200 people, and if it's not locked down, you realize your budget is just starting to tick and the percentage is just going up. So it's so important to have the director work it out beforehand. And as Aaron said, sometimes there's 120 versions to get it right, to get that feel right. And it's a lot more efficient to do it now than when they're on set.
And that's what we found with our process too, is that that's what we kind of strive to help production, is the sketch to screen. So we do it early on, work with them, and really kind of make sure that they're getting everything they need as far as the designs, as far as what the final look is going to be, so as close as we can get to the vision, so it's too vague. Then it helps everybody. It helps the production designer, it helps the DP, it helps the director, it helps everybody involved.
So next things we're going to look at is one of the biggest assets we worked on for Wonder Woman, which is the origin mural scene, if you recall. We're going to play a little clip for you and show you the corresponding key scenes for that as well.
Long ago, when time was new, and all of history was still a dream, the gods ruled the earth. Zeus, king among them. Zeus created beings over which the gods would rule. Beings born in his image, fair and good, strong and passionate. He called his creation man, and man.
So that gives you kind of a sweeping look of what the scene played out like in the film, but one of our ASC artists, Houston Sharp, who has actually done a live stream here as well, kind of led the effort on creating this beautiful, hand-painted, Baroque-looking style mural, which was all done in Photoshop, in a series of panels.
Yeah, and that was a big challenge. This is something that Patty Jenkins really wanted, is to feel classical as a piece of art, not feel like a digital piece of art. It was hard to actually achieve at the beginning, because we found, we started off in some of the early days of like using models and posing them and then painting over them, so because there's so many characters for this painting, there's thousands of them, and the time frame we needed was just it wasn't going to be beneficial to do it by hand, but we ultimately realized that that's the only way we could do it is paint it the way they used to, except in the computer. So no 3D models were really utilized at all. It was all like, you can see up here, like it was early sketches, slowly getting some headway as we were moving as far as like the density, what the characters were doing, and then slowly Houston would actually end up, filling these characters in, and finally in the painting, which you see there.
Yeah, and in the end, it was a full team of people.
Indeed.
There was a whole team of amazing artists on this, on
10 to 12.
production side, as well as in ASC. But it's just amazing. Like you forget, because we're spoiled. You forget how hard it is to paint classically. We all started as painters originally. I started as painter, and so did Aaron. But when you actually have to go back to a classical style, you forget that it's slow and it's methodical, and it just requires time and patience.
This process took us 6 months to complete, and through the office, it was the joke that Michelangelo had 6 years, and we had 6 months.
So you guys have talked about different styles for different directors and different aesthetics of films, obviously. This was something very unique for this film. What is that process and challenge like in terms of getting the look right, even on a character or a key scene, as the director sees it in their mind? Maybe a little bit more organic versus digital. How do you arrive at that final look?
Well, I mean, a lot of the look was, derived by certain artists that the director really, gravitated towards. The style of those artists, the classical artist, and it was a range. And then it was to hone in on how we were actually going to achieve it. A lot of it, the lighting on a lot of this stuff is very soft, as you can see. And some of the earlier paintings we were doing was getting a little harder and almost felt like it was very contemporary in its way of lighting. When you look at a lot of the lighting in these shots, they're very soft. It's very hard to tell exactly where the key light is coming from, because it's an overall kind of a softness, but then it goes off into the edges, into darkness, which makes it quite mysterious. This piece here, you can see how rough the original sketch was, which, we did a few different angles of how these Amazons were going to be riding the horses, and how they were going to be taking, basically in charge and control back of their life after being enslaved. And so this one was, an incredible piece, and all of them started off as this really rough sketch, and slowly you can see the progression to the final painting.
And the other thing to keep in mind with these as well is that it still had to be technically correct as well. So we still had to end up delivering a lot of it in layers. We ended up having to stitch everything properly until it was what was it? 16K?
16K. There were
a
8 to
16K.
10 16K images worked into one large 16K in the end.
Right, and then everything had to be handed off to the production visual effects team as well, so that they could fit it into the edit and properly dimensionalize it. So it was a massive team all around.
We joked we could have wrapped the Empire State Building with the final image of this.
Not big. So we're going to shift gears real quick into another previous summer film from this past year, Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Men Tell No Tales. I think one of the challenges for you guys on this one was, being I believe the 5th Pirates installment, how to kind of reimagine the world, reimagine these pirates, these characters, these creatures. And as we're going to show you, there's a lot of kind of cool and kind of macabre stuff you guys came up with.
Yeah, that was a big challenge, after many characters that have been ghost or kind of dead-looking pirates. How do you do something unique? There was, this is one that actually had a lot of animals in it too that we actually had to create. And this is one of the first things we started with, which was this kind of like mummified-looking birds. They still had to fly with wings, so they couldn't just be a skeleton flying around. So we just did, many different iterations. But this clip from the film shows that it was pretty accurate to the final design.
And actually, something else to mention about that that's really interesting. So we actually took reference from a real life thing. So I guess there's a particular sea that's particularly salty, and it can actually mummify dead animals in a specific way where it actually rots them away from the inside out, and then it kind of calcifies them. So they end up kind of sticking straight up off of the tree, dead, but like their insides are gone. So we ended up kind of taking that principle and then kind of applying it to the birds, but then kind of taking it one step further and treating it to the rest of the animals in this world, kind of like the sharks.
Yeah, and the sharks, it's an interesting issue that we had some creative license on, is that sharks have no skeleton except for their teeth. So to actually see rib cage in it wasn't necessarily scientifically accurate, but this is a movie, and you wanted to get the idea that if there was some kind of a form on the inside, if you were to see through it. So we had a little creative license there, and the director seemed to like this direction opposed to just having holes where you go all the way through it and just blubber and muscle.
And then quite a few different kind of characters in terms of the pirates, and you guys mentioned kind of bringing back the dead and taking a look at the initial kind of silhouettes and kind of studies you guys did on all those different character types.
This right here was the way that we started almost all of them, because it was this challenge of to come up with these unique ways of how these pirates are going to die, and we wanted to see the way that they died, by having things, they were basically in a ship that exploded and burned, and so some of them would be burned, some would be actually impaled with parts of the ship. And these are just a few. I think I forget how many of these
hundreds,
yeah,
hundreds and hundreds.
Yeah.
And then they ended because the one thing that they always wanted from the very beginning, they always said, is that they wanted this feeling like that they were underwater. So we even played around with different things. Of course, like the hair kind of floating and moving. Their clothing always kind of feeling like it was kind of moving in water. But not only that, there was another pass that we did where they were constantly being affected by caustics, like they're underwater constantly. So even if they're in full daylight, they wouldn't have harsh shadows. They would always feel like water was, like the reflections of light through water were kind of always moving around on them. That was another thing.
And then here's kind of the next progression into kind of more the ZBrush, grayscale model.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is after we start. The sketch phase that you saw before with all those little sketches, a lot of times they would pick hey, we like this one, we don't like this one, we like this one. So we would either go into a painted version that we just showed you before, or go right into a 3D model. A lot of times 3D model is great because it helps you be able to understand the geometry of that character, especially when you have something as complex as these characters that are fused together. Just to paint that and and understand how the body's going to work was more difficult than it was just to do a 3D model and actually kind of get the mechanics working in that way and then painting it. So sometimes in these paintings are a cross between, and then this is our main character.
Oh yeah. So we did these. Well, we were still kind of talking about the ways that they were dying, but they always knew that they wanted him to burn. They always wanted part of him to be kind of charred. But there was a number of different ways, so you can kind of see what we kind of started with in the beginning with the idea of the hair, kind of floating and the kind of lighter skin and all that kind of stuff. Some of them where where the skin has been burned away and it kind of leaves the kind of skull underneath that you can kind of see charred bits of. Another one where maybe he just ended up getting sliced straight through the head, and you end up just seeing his part of his floating head just kind of always following along. Mm-hmm. But one thing that they kind of settled on in the end is that he does get kind of charred, and then they kind of wanted it to kind of crack in the end, as if he kind of burned underneath, and then there's some kind of char on top, and then they ended up getting rid of the actual still burning stuff, but they kind of kept the essence of the cracking and the desaturated skin and the floating hair.
Yeah, I mean it's quite creepy, but it was that's the challenge with coming up with a ghost, and also a ghost that has to be for a Disney film as well. That it can't be too scary, so there has to be some humor involved with it. But it was a fun film, and it was great to be a part of that.
Oh, you can even see the cannonball guy right there.
Yeah. And then, went on to War of the Planet of the Apes, which was actually the third installment of this franchise that, Aaron has worked on.
With the whole team.
The whole... Thank you on the levels.
And I want you to know,
So these are the three
it's not just about
iterations
power.
of Planet of the Apes.
It's about giving us the hope to rebuild
Turn the volume down a little bit.
and reclaim the world we lost.
So this is this just shows you the how we started off with Rise of the Planet of the Apes, and that went through a really lengthy design phase, and we'll get into that here in a second. But I just wanted to illustrate, show how this design, how the character was evolving through the different movies, and how the influence of the concepts that we did, stayed true to the movie itself. Here's Caesar from Rise, and this is an illustration that we did when after hundreds of concepts for Caesar. Caesar was going through so many different variations on what would make him more human through the design process, and part of that was humans have this more the apes have actually this flat nose with no cartilage here, so there was designs early on that were very unflattering and for any character, human or ape. But it went through evolution of all these different ways of making an ape look human, but still feel like an ape. And what we found in the end, and this is here illustrates your typical chimpanzee and then Caesar, is that by almost leaving everything the same as on a chimp, the ears, the nose, the shape of the nose, the brows, everything, but moving the muzzle up closer to where the human mouth is, and then changing out the eyes to be more human, those two things were really what brought him to that humanity that made him something relatable to. Because that's part of the problem with a character like this. He's the hero of the film, and you need to be able to relate to him on a level that humans won't be creeped out by something that they're dealing with. Something that looks too much like a monster or something like that, or just a chimpanzee. But here this illustrates even this profile, where the mouth is, where the eyes are. So when they have these kind of moments, you can relate to them. It's as almost another human that you're working with. And obviously Andy Serkis made this character come to life with his performance, and it helped Weta really achieve some incredible ways of bringing him to life and giving a lot of emotion to this character. This was an early, when we also were starting, there was early days were to try to figure out if this character how it was going to be created. This is before Weta, these stages. This is when it was still in the early development phases, when the studio was still debating, maybe it could be a cross between a maybe puppet, maybe makeup, and visual effects hybrid. And eventually they went all digital, which I think was the right approach for this. But this was early days. But what it did is, by making this, which was a life-size silicone head, punched hair, and glass eyes, it helped kind of see what that character would look like in front of everybody, in a room, and just say, okay, is this a character that we can believe and be behind? And this was, used as a reference in the film.
And it was terrifying to have it in the office.
Yeah, we had
because you'd walk around a dark corner and then be there, just waiting for you.
those eyes looking at you. Yeah, you're just waiting for it to say something, but it never did. And this is a ZBrush model, and then we ended up doing a 3D print of this as well. But this model, this is the idea with, once we started figuring out what the head looked like, the character, the face, is what does the rest of the body look like, as far as giving it just, right when you see it, it feels like it has a lot of thought, it's thinking, it has a lot of emotion and intelligence, and by putting it in a pose where it feels like it's really sitting there and thinking about something, brings it to life.
And with Bad Ape, they actually, there's some reference that's actually really similar to this in the end, because they really wanted to maintain this kind of hokey-jokey, kind of cracked out appearance. They really wanted to, really make him look like he had been on his own, out in the wild, as for years and years and years. So they really wanted this kind of emaciated, showing his ribs through and really thin. And they took this in an interesting direction because, in a weird way, he's the only ape that wears clothes. The rest of them all have, kind of tribal kind of strings and bits of armor and spears and that kind of stuff that they touch. But he was the only one that actually had like a full parka and had really become human. So yeah, there was something really interesting about that character development here, in that he was the most human of them in a weird way.
Yeah, and I think that what's interesting is even from the first movie, well, it was actually the second movie when they started thinking about, and we were designing the early days of clothing for the apes. Because another thing was to try to figure out like how do these apes feel more human, like they're creating their own culture, and you believe them as a society. Opposed to just running around as naked apes. So I think that part of that was by giving that tribal quality in the second movie really helped that. And then the minimal kind of wardrobe, like jewelry and stuff and armor. But a lot of it still is like, this is a franchise that's well known that, from, Charlton Heston in the first movie, where all the apes were wearing clothes. So I think at a certain point there was like an idea of how do you get it to this place to where it looks like it can evolve into that movie that eventually will possibly be made.
And this is actually an interesting heads up here, because one of the other things that that we spent a lot of time on was, one, they all had to look completely unique. You had to be able to spot them from a distance, which is really hard to do with just a bunch of apes. So they all ended up being completely different species of apes. Some of them were more bonobos, some of them were orangutans, some of them were chimps, some of them were gorillas. But then as well, there was another layer to it, where you had females that were acting females and acting males. Chimpanzee females don't look very nice. But you wanted them to feel, when you see Caesar's family, you wanted them to look like a family, not just a bunch of chimpanzees. And so we ended up spending time trying to give these unique characteristics and unique features to make them feel like a whole cast and crew, uniquely different from a distance, and all of their silhouettes had to be unique.
Yeah, a lot of that too is, a lot of these characters would get killed in the process, and you need to feel emotion for these characters, and if you didn't really recognize them as a certain character because they just kind of felt like they were another chimpanzee that didn't have any unique markings or look or anything like that, then you may have lost that impact of that emotion that you were supposed to feel. But this really shows up here the range of like size, but also putting an albino gorilla in the mix too, just to kind of like help change up the gorillas so that they didn't feel like they were kind of blending together as well. But these really shows like again the range. And
This was one of the longer processes for you guys, just to give each chimp and each character a personality.
Well, yeah, because you had to go. They usually started as just busts. Just the heads, just working on facial features. And then as soon as you started getting to a place that they were liking, by the 30th version, you'd move to profiles, and then you'd move there, and okay, this is looking good. And then you'd finally go to the full bodies. And every step along the way, the focus was individuality and uniqueness. And because, like I said, when they're walking through a crowd, you need to spot the important ones immediately. And that was part of the challenge as well.
Yeah, and this one helps illustrate, like, our characters. You have the albino gorilla, the other gorilla, you have Caesar. And that's, one of the characters that we designed, you can tell, with the same kind of nose ring and earring. So all these feel like they're unique, and you can tell them apart immediately. And these get into our key scenes that we talked about before, and the importance of key scenes, and with Wonder Woman as well. This was chasing Bad Ape. At this point in the movie, we didn't know what this was. We thought, because this is the first time we've seen an ape with clothing too, so that was a kind of a unique thing that they were playing with as far as Bad Ape, because we think they're chasing some person, because he's shooting at him. he stole something from them, so it's like, you know, they're, so and it's not until they actually find him they realize he's an ape with clothes.
But the other thing that these key scenes show is the establishing of a palette, the establishing of a tone and an emotion that you're hoping a lot of times will kind of follow through the whole sequence. So, you know, there's whole wooded sequences, there's whole sequences in the snow, there's, you know, even there's some in the desert, and each of these sequences helps to tell part of that story and part of the emotion that's going along with that story.
And another great example of a director having the vision before they start shooting of what it's going to look like and feel like, and the key scenes and seeing the footage they're almost one-to-one. So he definitely had that vision before they started shooting of what he wanted and where it was going to go. So there was no confusion on the set.
Yeah, and that was an important scene with the, how Caesar was basically taking his, he was going to go alone to get revenge for who killed his, I'm not going to give it away, so if you haven't seen it, then I'm not going to say who he killed, but...
You should see it.
Well, you should see it. It's a great movie. It's, I think there's three, it was meant to be a trilogy, and they did that, and I think it completed the trilogy really well, but it leaves it open to tell more of the story.
This is a fun one as well because early on they said they wanted it to kind of feel like a traveling Western. They really wanted that good, bad, and the ugly kind of feel with them on horseback and kind of riding together into this insurmountable force, you know, four cool guys with a shotgun kind of a thing. But it's interesting to have that feel all the way through and carry through.
Yeah.
So the next thing we want to show you is a TV show we worked on called The Mist, which was on Spike, and this is an example of quote-unquote fix it in post. So the first thing we want to show you is what the original, and it's a lovely show, it's a great show, Stephen King, big fan, but you know, once again, it's not always where directors or the production team can execute exactly as they imagined on set. And in which case, we get into the whole fix it and post, phase where we bring in a team such as ASC, and we kind of create digital assets where there was once just practical. So we're going to show you the original scene as it was shot, and show you what we did to it to transform it.
So a little bit of background that's happening in here. They have walked out into the woods to, this priest has walked out into the woods to sacrifice this woman into the mist to satiate its hunger so that they can all survive and live to fight another day. And then the mist kills people in interesting ways. We were given this edit, and they basically said, what can you imagine to make it feel cool?
Well, and they came to us and they had shot it, and they just weren't happy that there wasn't any emotion or feeling, and it wasn't scary.
Yeah, there was, part of the process they didn't really, they thought that they could hide a lot of it with the fog and the mist, but when they saw the silhouettes and the characters, they felt it just wasn't as dramatic as they wanted it to be, and also unique to each character. Some of the characters just blend together.
And this is supposed to be the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, so a pretty imposing set of characters. And the priest gets dragged away.
And then they spear him from the chest and they drag him away. So they said, what can you do? What do you guys think? And Aaron immediately said, we'll just replace them and make them all digital.
Yeah,
and I was like, because they were like, this has to be done in 4 weeks. And I was like, I don't know about that.
Yeah, because one of the things was to just make them, clean them up. Like, can you add stuff to them, spice them up a bit, I guess, and enhance them. And when the showrunner was basically unhappy with some of the angles that were shot too, then it was like, well, there's not much we can do when it's actually changing angles. I mean, if you're just going to stick with these angles, we might be able to do something, but it's not going to be still as satisfying as just creating them from scratch, which is what we did.
And this is another great example of our sketch-to-screen process. We had designed early on for the television series to get the feeling and look of the series. And for this sequence, we had really only designed, we'd done a few visual effect shots, but when this came up in the show, it really fit our process, and they came specifically to us and said they hadn't bid it out to anybody because they wanted the design phase and go all the way through to the visual effects to really capture and put emotion into this scene. And it's as Steffen said, we were excited to be part of it and be on it, but it's 4 weeks from sketch to the final visual effects. And usually with a week overhang, it was 5 weeks, but it was a lot of work to tackle that and do that in 4 weeks.
And it was, but as soon as Aaron said, we're going to do it digitally, we were like, okay, let's get it. So we designed it with that in mind. We did the amazing design team at ASC whip these up, basic ZBrush model as a base, sort of painting on top of it and just whipping out designs in just a couple of days. And because we had to lock it down in a couple of days, all of a sudden the clock was ticking. So yeah, once we designed those out, we had to imagine what was actually happening in these scenes. So we storyboarded it out from scratch as if none of it existed. Mike?
Yeah, no, once again, that process, get those designs done as quick as possible and get them to sign off on. Because as we started laying this out, our asset team had to be working simultaneously, starting to build them. And as our layout team was doing layout to figure out how we were gonna, redo the camera angles and redo the whole scene. So we had multiple teams going on different projects all at once so we could meet that deadline.
Well, and R&D'ing all the cloth sim, R&D'ing the horse animation, the rigging, the muscle sim for the horses themselves. It was a lot of work, but Aaron was totally correct. 3D was definitely the way to do it, because then in the end you get a product that is, one, much more unique, but a lot more emotional and just a lot more impressive, because you don't have those confines of a plate that's already been shot.
And ultimately, it was easier to do it this way. I mean, there was nothing to track to because they didn't think about this, so there wasn't any tracking marks.
Any VFX prep.
So any of that stuff that wasn't prepped in it would have been nearly impossible for us to actually track anything on, to do any augmentation. So, I mean, it was really, it was a lot of fun and stress at the same time, but that's usually...
Stress.
Okay.
Emphasize stress.
A lot of stress.
But no, we were all excited because, it's cool to bring, the 4 Apocalypse to life.
Yeah,
so
man.
Yeah.
It's a monster movie, man.
Yeah.
So you saw the before, and this is the after.
She goes, oh, well.
But... it was a big team of people that ended up making that come to life. Matt in the back headed up asset dev. Keefer over there was one of the amazing animators on the horses and the bowmen. And I mean, it's especially impressive when you realize that you had to fit all of that process in, from the design to the asset to the rigging to the texture, animation, sim, comp, all of it in 4.5 weeks.
And the emphasis on team, there is no I and there is no individuality of doing this. If we did not work together as a team and have a cohesiveness in the studio, we would have never hit the deadline. So it's amazing how everybody just pulls together to complete that process, and everybody knowing their job. I can't emphasize that enough, that each person doing their job to 110% to hit that deadline, and even being proactive of knowing what's going to be next to accomplish that process to get it out is kudos to the team and the cohesiveness of working together.
So now that you guys have a good feel and a flavor for the type of work that we do and how we've employed it in some of these big projects, it's a big effort and focus of ours to apply that same sketch-to-screen process to our own original development and IP as a studio, which has been very liberating, and also offering that now in our very first workshop, which we're calling ASC Masterclass. So we're going to take a brief break, and then when we get back, we're going to show you exactly how we apply that to our own world and franchise creation, and then give you some exclusive first looks at the ASC Masterclass, which will be launching in March. And this will be the official kind of open registry as of this evening for you guys to sign up and hopefully come join us at our studio.
Is everybody?
That was a very short break. That was a very short break. For those folks watching at home, we'll let you finish using the restroom, getting your snacks.
Yeah, come back from the refrigerator.
Fixing your hair.
Sit on that couch.
Plop back down.
Put your feet up on the coffee table.
Get comfy.
Come on, man.
All
Get
right.
comfy.
Good.
Just waiting for everyone to file back in here. Alrighty, so I think we'll go ahead and kick things off. So there's 2 new faces up on the stage if you haven't noticed. This isn't a magic trick. Oh, close your mic. We have 2 of our very talented ASC artists. We've got David Olson, who is a Gnomon alumni himself.
Hi, everyone.
Yeah, a little applause, please. And Erik Keefer, our animator.
And just starting, a lot of our artists are from Gnomon, and one of the great things that Gnomon has instilled in the artist is, one, their well-roundedness, but the importance of understanding the time and commitment it takes to work in a studio. It isn't a 9-to-5 job. You aren't in at 9 and you clock out at 5. There's a lot of overtime. And these guys really understand, and Alex and his team here at Gnomon really emphasize that in the class, and we thank them for that, because the artists coming out of Gnomon are prepped and ready to go. And then when we hire them and take them in, it's our job to let them understand what the importance of the production is. They have the skill. Now we take them with that skill and emphasize, this is the production now, and this is what needs to be done.
Yeah, I mean, on top of that, I'd say that the majority of the people who work in our company are actually from Gnomon. So it's just a testament to the skills that people are imbued with when they leave Gnomon, for sure.
So I want to hear from you guys for a second. David, for example, started as an intern with us, and now...
Yeah, back in early February.
Yeah, so you've come a long way. So between you and Erik, I mean, you guys went to school here. What is it like in the transition for you, learning what you've learned at Gnomon, having that great foundation, and then kind of the evolution into kind of the professional workflow?
Tell you what, I was always told that going to Gnomon, you would be working the hardest you would ever work, and then you get out into the industry, and everything would be easier compared to Gnomon, and that's just not true.
We run a hard ship at ASC.
Let me ask, I mean, this is a great time to have this conversation. What was the biggest surprise for each of you when you started in production, that you weren't expecting when you hit a production floor?
A lot of Gnomon is working on individual projects, so the working in a pipeline and figuring out the pushes and pulls of that was definitely a learning curve, as it's kind of hard to figure that out when you're working on individual projects. So,
I think you have like a kind of lone wolf mentality sometimes, working on your work because it's yours, and then we get into production, you have to communicate, you have to work as a team. It's all puzzles fitting in this massive puzzle, and yeah, it was a learning curve, but I think we got it.
Well, and that actually makes sense, because one thing when you're working in a shop, you usually have a pipeline in place, something like Shotgun or something like that, where you build your main asset scene, then you have your layout scene, then you have your animation scene, then you have all of these things come together to fit to make a shot, and nobody can work outside of that pipeline. Nobody can make something that doesn't fit in there, because it just won't work. Everybody has to do their piece to make the bigger puzzle look good.
and that's also like one of the greatest aspects of it too, because everyone brings a little bit of themselves and a little bit of their expertise to the table.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and building on that, the visual effects pipeline workflow itself is a pretty complicated beast to tackle, let alone when you add in everything from the design element as well. So when you're really taking things from an initial 2D rough sketch like you guys saw earlier, all the way through literally every single phase that it can be taken through and evolved through over the process is done in-house, in shop, in studio, everything down to the 3D prints like you see here for our 3D rapid prototyping. So I think it's just a testament to cross-training, I guess, so to speak, as an artist to, at least if you're focused on one discipline, understanding what's around you in that pipeline.
And being flexible. Each studio out there, we have our own pipeline that we're building every day, adding to it, making it stronger, that it's unique to ASC. When you go to another studio, theirs is completely different. So there's that learning curve. So when you're getting out of school, it's so important to be flexible because each studio will be completely different.
And to know a little bit of something about every part of that pipeline, because you never know when you'll be expected to contribute to that part of the pipeline.
Yeah,
that was really the impetus for us to create something like the masterclass, which we're going to show you guys in a little bit, is not in replacement of anything that you're learning at Gnomon or your foundation of your experience in the technical aspects, but it's how to put those puzzle pieces together and work in a professional workflow and setting.
Yeah, Keefer mentioned it, that it's like a big picture, and if you were just working in the corner by yourself, not paying attention what the whole picture is, you're just not really understanding what the output is. So you always have to be knowing what everyone else is working on that picture is doing. And if you don't, you become kind of an impediment to the production because you're not being proactive, you're not thinking what the other person's doing. So when you're creating things, you're not going, hey, this will help this person down the pipeline. You always really need to be thinking ahead and what you're passing off to other artists. Is it right? Is it this? How are they going to use it? It's consistently thinking ahead while you're doing your task.
And I think you could say that rings true, not just for the artists, right? But directors, producers, writers, any role you have in the creative pipeline, the more you understand about it, because again, film and television and entertainment is so reliant on the digital workflow nowadays that it makes you a better filmmaker, a creator, to understand the pipeline, whether you're hands-on or not. And I think we've worked with some very talented, award-winning, highly paid directors and producers that I think in some cases you might wish that if they knew a little bit more about the process, it might make their lives easier and maybe our lives easier, and we could all get along and sing Kumbaya. So, with that, we're going to show you a little glimpse of some of the original projects, like we said, we're working on. It's very important for us as a visual effects house and design firm. We're often looked at as a vendor, right, for studios. So they come to us and they commission work for us. We're very fortunate enough to be able to share this with you today, but we don't own any of it. And most of the stuff that we work on obviously doesn't see the light of day. So it's an inspiration for us to be able to say, okay, let's apply the same tools in world building and ideation and apply it to some projects that we can develop on our own and hopefully bring to market someday. And a lot of that is powered by the very creative minds, not only up here, but the artists in the studio who get to pitch ideas in something we call ASC Universe. And it's a little internal development pipeline that, you know, the best idea wins. If you've got an idea for a VR game or a film or a television show, let's put it to work and see how we can kind of bring it to life. So one of the first things we're working on right now is a film called Embodied, and Erik can speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, Embodied is a project that, much to like what Chase was saying, we're developing our own projects, our own IP. A lot of that is because, you know, we're in this industry to be artists and create great art. A lot of times when we're working on other people's projects, we have an incredible time, but we see a lot of the problems that happen along the way, and I think that that's, you know, not that we feel like we have all the answers and we can do it better, but we are in this industry to be able to create art and create, you know, things that inspire us. And most of us are, you know, sci-fi and horror fans that do this stuff, and most of the projects that we're developing are in that genre. You won't see like ASC trying to develop, you know, like 50 Shades of Grey or something like that, or
rom-com.
Yeah, well, rom-com. If we did, they'd have guns and there would be blood.
Yeah, we would be the best rom-com ever.
Yeah, it'd be 50 Shades of Blood.
Yeah, there you go. But so most of the projects, like this particular one, Embodied, which is one that has been evolving, it's based roughly on a book that was brought to us at ASC to help kind of like rethink the story. And so we've been developing it internally with the production as producers and me as a director on this as a great avenue for us to, you know, create like a fun, action-packed sci-fi horror. It's like Thelma and Louise meets Aliens. So in Texas. So there's nothing more fun than that. And the original story really had these elements, except the creatures were a little different. They were more zombie. Zombies are kind of like dying out, so we actually came up with an alien approach on this. And not to give away too much of the story, but this is kind of we're going to show you a little bit of the process of when we actually have an idea, a pitch, what we sometimes do. Sometimes we'll do shorts like we did, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the other short I directed called Archetype, that will go all the way to where we do a short, and it got picked up for development at Fox, and went through its development hell there.
AKA Disney now.
Yeah, AKA Disney. But there's different ways of pitching a project, and so some of this particular one, we have a poster that this isn't necessarily the cast, but it's two strong women that are going out to kick some ass, and
before we show you this quick little teaser, the reason we wanted to share this with you guys is to empower you to take a similar or your own approach in developing your projects. I mean, the whole reason for this is this is the process that works for us, but what's unique is we're going out and pitching these projects, and we're artists, we're creators, so we're doing visual first. And they're like, where's the script? And in some cases, it's just a concept, a creature, a world first. And in many ways, that's disruptive in a good way. Studios are used to seeing a script laid on their desk, and they have to imagine this world, but when they can be presented with a series of character images and key scenes and assets, it brings it to life with them in a new way, and we're starting to see a shift in that traditional model of development, which hopefully you guys as creators, as artists, as storytellers, feel empowered that, you might not have to be a powerhouse writer, but if you have the vision, the concept in your mind, you can bring it to life in other ways, in a visualization sort of process.
And as a company, we realize visual effects are, one aspect of it, design was another, and we really sat as a company and put our heads together and said, how do we ride this out? What are our strengths? Where are we strong? We've got the design, we've got visual effects, and we have all these creative people. Why don't we put this IP together and start using our talents to this creative side and take ownership to it? Because we've been helping all these other people create their worlds. Why can't we do that ourselves and really make a full, complete company?
Yeah. So just to show you, we're going to show you a quick little teaser. This is literally just some title cards, some key scenes, and some music. That was whipped out pretty quickly, but gives you a sense of what we're sending around to kind of pitch with. Gives you a quick little flavor.
Thanks. Yeah, so this is, this is put together from a series of, that little teaser there from a series of concept art that we'll go through here in a bit. But a lot of it was, trying to give a tone, putting this together was a tone for what this film could be. We do have this one actually has a full script. The script is, it's a lot of fun. Part of it, there's humor in it. It's, a lot of this wasn't just to make this really kind of overly serious, depressing movie about creatures killing us. There's things about reality. Part of this, it all starts in Texas and in the oil fields, and they pump out some kind of an alien parasite that's inside the oil itself, and so that's where it starts and it gets into the people, and it grows and changes, and this is the creatures that kind of grow out of the humans as they develop. And what we wanted to do is really take away from, be able to create some kind of a fun creature that could be iconic, as well as, take help the story, make sense of why, does this take place in Texas? Because the book itself that this is based on was, it was all in Texas, but didn't really have like a reason why there was a zombie outbreak. So what I wanted to do is kind of tell like a little bit of a story of what we do to our, our world by, pumping out fossil fuels that eventually will kill us. So there's a little bit of this idea of this story underlining of climate and what we're doing to ourselves by telling it in a nice sci-fi kind of like, fun way. And the music too is to help evoke the fun in it. So it's not, one that takes itself too serious. You want to have fun with this, have these women, they have unique guns, and part of it, I won't get into detail why she has a water gun, but once you see the movie, it'll all make sense.
No spoilers yet.
Yeah.
No spoilers.
But yeah, as you can see, an idea, a film can start with the idea of a creature, as you just saw, or it can start with a series of, like you would do in a writer's room, beat out the different scenes and moments, but in this case, we did key scenes. So you can see the kind of the act breaks and such like that. So just to give you some inspiration of different ways to bring your ideas and concepts to life.
Yeah, and part of these, help, illustrate is that there's an element of what's happening in these scenes, but also like what the mood and the tone is. We didn't want this to all feel too monochromatic, so there's a little bit of rich color in some of these, so that it feels, like its own style. So this is just one of our projects that we've been developing, and it's in the process right now of hopefully getting picked up. We'll find out very soon. But we've been going out, like this is, once we have this, we have the goal really for a lot of our projects that we go out is to have a full package. And that's what you need these days for any type of like film or anything that you're trying to develop, is have a script, a concept, a director, everybody in place that's going to make this film in a budget and what it's going to take to do it. So that's what we've done with Embodied. So now we're finding a good home for it.
And it's the same thing with all of these other ones. All of our projects. We try and develop in that same way, and there's just tons of them because, like said, we have we're a small shop. We only have 35 people in house at the moment, but each of them comes to the table with unique ideas that we try and develop as a team and bring to life. And each of these characters and even the next environment here as well has a really fun idea. This one's a personal favorite of mine because I really like the idea. The concept with this guy is that he's like a little micro being, and called Blink. And the idea is that time effectively moves so slow because he's so small. I think the core idea is, I think the entire film takes place in the middle of somebody's step coming down on him, and it's his whole world slowly throughout the whole film about to be eradicated, and his journey through it.
Yeah, we want it to be fun. It's an animated film. It's the idea is when you look at microorganisms, the smaller they are, the faster they move, and the bigger you are, and a lot of it has to do with mass and gravity. But this was a way to tell a story in a unique way that in a blink of an eye, your life could be gone.
So we're going to just kind of show you just a few other kind of conceptual imagery that we've developed over some time, and just to kind of give you a flavor of, let your imagination run wild and just kind of follow that path.
Yeah, some of these are different, different stages of development. This one's an old one that I had started years ago that I'm still trying to find the proper legs for it, to where it goes, but it's a personal favorite. It's called Tethered Islands, and it's really about like an ecosystem that's gone way beyond its means of stabilizing a natural ecosystem down below, so it has to create one in space and pump all the resources down below into the world. But then there's wars that happen within that because there's always wars.
It's dark. This is a dark presentation.
Sorry, I went dark there for a second, but
not PG. This is not
it happens.
PG. But yeah, you can see, again, Aaron, in this case, I believe this is, your work where you just detailed the entire landscape of what the world might look like in that alternate reality.
Well, this is one of the domes. So these dome worlds are, one of the story iterations that we are doing as we're developing this is not just our world, it's many worlds that have lost their worlds in a tragic way, and so they've come together. And this is one that's, and part of it is, and you don't really see it in this image, but part of it is that the entire sphere is an ecosystem that is wrapped around inside these domes.
And this one's another one, but it's like each of these has its own unique story, but this one's more, robot wars, and I think the next one is actually a scene from. Which one was this?
No, this is Tattoo. So Tattoo was a film I was up to direct and still in development on it, but it was brought to me as an idea, and it was a really interesting concept of these tattoos that actually became weapons. You'd peel them off, and they would actually solidify, and they became weapons. It was a mechanically engineered or engineered assassin. And it was just an interesting concept, so we're in the development. So we do these concepts to help that process develop internally.
I mean, to add to everybody, wannabe filmmakers, if you guys are artists, they put a one sheet together, right? You can put your image and a short, story of what you are imagining, and I mean, that can be sold too. It's really interesting. It really is left up to you to be creative and put your ideas on paper and really just keep on doing it. And that's what we do in the office is really get everybody's idea and see which one kind of floats to the top and really try to put it into development and what we're good at, right? We're good at creating images and visual effects. So that's kind of where we start, and we work kind of the opposite direction and then put writing to it, where most people, will write and then try to put images to again.
Well, sometimes, a lot of the, projects will start with an idea, and then they'll be created like an image that actually helps spark that idea into a unique way. A lot of the imagery too that we've helped with other projects for even really well-known directors and writers is to help them create their movie early on, but while they're writing. So there's something very powerful about creating imagery to help create a story and a world. As long as you understand what the foundation's going to be, then you're not as you're writing, suffering through what this, all the details of that world has to be. It can be created by the artist.
Well, yeah, feel empowered as an artist. You have a very unique skill set, which in many cases, the visual speaks louder than, say, 10 to 15 to 20 pages of a script. So, that's a very powerful tool when you're trying to bring your project and concept to life. Tell it through visuals, tell it through imagery, because how many times have we had producers come to us and say, I've got a 200-page script, and no one gets the vision that I'm trying to articulate. And it's like, okay, well, let's do some key scenes. And then, boom, we nailed it, and you get the project greenlit because you have those key images that everyone can rally around and say, I get it. I see the world now.
Well, and like I was saying before, it doesn't matter how big they are. Steven Spielberg still has to do this.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Every big producer, every big producer, every big director, every key group still has to bring these images to the table originally to say, this is why I deserve $350 million to go make this film. Because that's a lot of money to part with. So you have to be sure when you do it. So they do these images to make sure that, in a weird way, kind of that, the team who's making it knows what they're doing, and that they have something in mind already, that they're not just going to take the money and then go into development hell and spin it and burn it.
Yeah, we had a project come in, and I won't say the name of it, but they had a 255-page script, and that equates to really almost 3.5, 4-hour film. And then once we read it, we realized that the first 50 to 100 pages was just to set up the feeling of where they were in the story. And once we sat down and worked it out with them, we had created about 15 key scenes for them to let a studio understand where they were, what the vision was, and they could start cutting down the script to a much more manageable script to, that 2-hour, not a 4-hour saga. And it was just amazing how it really worked.
And I would say being the people who kind of spearhead the pitch package process, I'd say, it's the majority of our work. The majority of our work sitting down with these directors and producers and helping them imagine their films, helping them write it, helping them figure out the holes, and how they can make it better, and how they can get it sold.
Yeah, so you've been seeing some of the other images. There are a variety of different projects, different stages. This is one called Titan. It's a bounty hunter and his dog on Titan, one of Saturn's moons. This is way in the future, and it's a fun project. It's a Western type of idea, almost like I wanted to play around with this to be more of a spaghetti Western, especially this next image, really kind of like, kind of a standoff between characters. And this is early days in development on this project. The next one is some artwork I did a long time ago, and it was a series. I was going to create a book with these characters, and it's they're all these weird like kind of almost undead, demonic creatures in a portrait, and they all look content and happy being as ugly as they are. But this inspired a project that we're developing called The Evils, and it's early days, and it's a really cool concept that is like our own version of the Munsters and the Addams Family, kind of, but it's our own mythology, and it's really early days. But we did a promo piece. We shot characters with a green screen and makeup, and going to do a digital augmentation. And the goal is to put together a little short, that kind of teaser that helps give the tone, the feel of the show, and it and hit some of the networks or Netflix or wherever as a TV series. So all this is just a little bit of like some of the projects. We have many others that we're developing, but we wanted to kind of just give you like a flavor of the range that we're kind of doing, and a little bit of the process of how some are more like embodied, where it's artwork along with music and as a pitch piece with the script, and then like this The Evils, which we'll show in maybe our next time we're out with the more development on that. And that one actually we're shooting with actors, and so it depends on your budget, but putting together like if you're interested in ever going out and trying to pitch your project, it's good to think about like the entire pitch, and the project of what the images, the script, the whole package, because that's how it's going to sell.
Well, and to that note, creating a short and taking it from A to Z shows whoever you're pitching it to that you can do it, that you are capable of imagining it from the beginning to the end, and that you're capable of guiding the ship and making sure that it works. And to that end, that's actually why one of the main reasons why we wanted to do masterclass, why we wanted to teach this masterclass, is to give everybody the tools to go out and make their own project. In the end, it's not about learning specific tools. Like I was saying, we're not going to teach people, which buttons to click and all that kind of stuff. It's going to be more theory and philosophy, and how do you stitch everything together as a filmmaker, as an artist, as a writer, as a producer, as a director. The goal is to understand the entire process.
It's a process that we at ASC, use, and a lot of it is like, this is sketch to screen. You've heard that quite a bit, and it is this idea from the script all the way to the final product, and that's what we, aside from creating, your own IP, but if you are interested in just working for a company like ASC or any other company, having the good foundation of like what is it to work with, like. What David and Erik was talking about, like, what the difference were of working with a team and understanding that, and the importance wherever you're going to be working or whatever you're developing, team effort and teamwork is the only way that you'll actually move forward.
So this is going to be a first glimpse for you guys into some of the assets we've been working on in-house to create this masterclass experience. Everything that we're about to show you and that we're going to be demonstrating in this masterclass is an original idea, an original concept, and we've taken ourselves every step of the way through this sketch-to-screen process. So it's not just lip service. We're making ourselves do it from the very beginning to the very end, but for the sake of showing you the very beginning to the very end.
Yeah, and as we were saying, it's really for everybody: producers, directors, artists, digital artists. it's to understand what process goes in. Whether you're a director, you understand the whole process now of what each person's doing. If you're a producer, you get a bigger picture of how a production runs from, breaking down a script all the way to the last visual effects. If you're an artist, you're getting really key instruction from the artists we have at ASC, but it's really the ASC process that we're sharing with you that we use with the studios and directors now.
So for example, one of the very first phases is sometimes a director will come in with a script, or sometimes no script at all in many cases. And maybe they have a very clear vision or a very kind of blue sky approach. So for you guys here, and especially kind of, Erik and David, what is it like to try and interpret a vision that sometimes only exists on paper and page, or maybe not at all? Trick question.
Uh-oh. It's always interesting because you're trying to take like the idea that exists as a bunch of words on a piece of paper and then visualize it into something that can like function in a real world environment depending on like what the script is. And so you gotta kind of figure out like what's going to work in this world, what is going to work for the story, how is it going to interact with the characters, and then you want to visually kind of explain that with shape, language, form, like textures, all that kind of stuff, and in the design. So you can look at something and essentially like know how you're supposed to feel already.
I think part of it is kind of getting a feel for the director himself and his tastes, because I think like Steven Spielberg might want something very different than Ninja, for example, a very different taste in the aesthetics. So I think that's part of it, is learning their language and getting to know them a little bit. That helps a lot.
And part of that, I think, as you guys do, is knowing the right questions to ask. Some questions that might not be answered in their minds, or they might have asked themselves, or certainly in the script. And as an artist, knowing which questions to ask them to elicit that direction.
Yeah, any question is never a bad question, right? If you can get an answer and point you in that direction, always ask that question.
So for the focus of this first masterclass, we decided on the theme of AI. That was our inspiration for this type of style and approach for character and world building. And Aaron can speak to, again, this is something that we've seen from the very beginning of cinema, as you can see in Metropolis. So there's an infinite ways to attack it, and we're going to kind of talk you through what led us down this path.
Yeah, there's the reason that we chose AI for the first class that we're doing, because our classes we're going to do everything from creatures to ghosts to demons to, you can imagine. But there's something about AI. I've worked on so many different robot films and AI films that included the movie AI, which I'll talk about a little bit here in the as we move forward. But there's something that's it's been in books, it's been in film since the beginning, and now it's part of our real world. It's amazing how AI has really evolved. And the thing is, with that allows for a designer and for a project to go in so many different ways. I mean, you can go to something that's extremely silicone flesh, almost feels like it's a human body, or even alien in a lot of ways, to something that's very robotic in the more traditional way. And the ranges are so far in between. You have AI from alien worlds that can be, brought into, like Transformer, any of the, there's such a range. So we felt it was a really good one to start with our class, so that we could actually, talk about when a script comes, how do you break that down? Like if this character has to do a certain thing, you may decide to go very standard or very traditional with the design, but that's not going to be that interesting. So you want to break that box and work with the director and work with, how far can you go before you go too far.
And on this next slide, we were chatting with Kyle Brown, who's one of the artists in-house and one of the teachers here at Gnomon. And we were kind of talking with him about, because like I was saying, this masterclass thing is a team effort. All of the artists will be teaching a segment. Each of them will be teaching one piece in part, and Kyle will be talking through the design level for this one. But he started, us and him together, started sourcing all these kind of, these texture references and inspiration of pieces and parts to kind of start imagining where we wanted to go with our particular AI, our particular robot, and kind of going from there.
And again, David and Eric are currently working on this asset themselves, so maybe you guys can speak to kind of the inspiration of drawing from real world or other films or textures like we see here.
Drawing from real world is absolutely the most important because it's definitely kind of where you jump from. You always want to look at like what's working in the real world and kind of improve upon that for whatever project you're working on. So say a futuristic robot, you would look at what works present day so that you can relate to it when you're seeing it on screen, and so it becomes believable for you.
Yeah, I think for movement, I think looking at heavy industrial machinery would definitely be a good place to start. But as far as like psychology, I'm definitely thinking of like Terminator, Ed 209, stuff like that. Yeah. I'm hearing the Ed 209 sound effects in my head constantly as I animate.
Well, that's what that sound is in the office. I'm hearing that.
And speaking of that, looking at the other concepts, the other kind of concept developments that we've done in the past, and other things that we kind of come up with, there's a wide swath. So the question is where do you go in that design process? Sometimes you'll pick a specific venue, you'll pick a specific path, and then you'll kind of travel down that path, and you'll realize that it kind of evolves as it goes. We do that quite a lot with the clients that we work with, where you'll do one design out of a whole bunch, and they'll say, "Ooh, that's quite good. Here's some notes. Here's some notes. Here's some notes," and you'll kind of watch it evolve down that process with you working in tandem with their creative team to come up with something that they feel is unique and they feel tells the story.
And we're going to show you, again, that exact timeline and evolution with some of Aaron's earlier work in AI you can speak to.
Yeah, this is AI. I did this when I was working at Stan Winston's before I founded my company. And this is one of the first things that was designed for AI. There was other robots, of course, in the movie, but this one was the ones that were highly advanced, 2,000 years in the future. And Spielberg really wanted them to feel organic in a lot of ways and almost alien-like, because they were like the new race on Earth that evolved. And this is the evolution. So one of the first designs I was sketching out, and I was doing it more traditional to begin with, and when Spielberg saw the design, he said, "Hey, I'd like that particular design, which was based on this one over here on the left, to be more fleshed out." So at the time too, and this is an interesting story because this is the beginning of the story of how I started using computer-generated software to create designs, and this is the first project that I did that with. So it was fascinating because it was one that I was traditionally drawing this robot. And Stan came to me one day and said, "Hey, Spielberg really liked this design. I'd like you to use this computer that you said you're going to animate with and create this robot with it." And I was like, "Well, this was soft homage, and this is like 2000. So this is before ZBrush, this is before any of that stuff that was out there. It was even before Maya. It was there was Power Animator before all that." So this is the first project that I worked on, and it was intimidating because it was like I knew that this software wasn't made to do this, and he was forcing me to do something that I was a little bit uncomfortable because I didn't realize that I actually was able to do it. So the first design was this one over here on the left, and I remember when I did it, he came in the room and said, "Okay, I want to see what you've done," and he just when he saw it realized. This looks like whatever, because we've seen so many designs, but this is before there was anything realized. He was freaking out.
I was going to say, you made him purchase a $20,000 software at that time, and he wanted you to use it. But,
I know. I think the software at that time was more. I think it was $70,000. Something ridiculous.
Crazy.
It was like, it's kind of hard to believe now that, software, you go, gosh, it costs this much, and it's like to buy software, but way back at this time, ILM was really the only one really using it, and there wasn't too many other companies. So for me, I was excited because I was able to use, in a way, technology to create technology.
And you could say Aaron was probably one of the first pioneers and rode the wave of transitioning from pencil sketches to the digital realm to do designs?
And this one was when Spielberg saw the design, because there was other companies, and ILM was also doing traditional concepts as well. They were doing paintings and also Photoshop, because Photoshop was available at this time, but you know, it was just used just almost like you would draw with. But Spielberg at that time said, you know, whoever's doing this, I want them to design all the robots, because this was something no one was doing at the time. So I was excited about this push that Stan did, and I have to give him, you know, praise that he's the one that really helped push me to where I am today because of that. But and that may be, you know, another reason why I wanted to do this as a first class, because AI is such an important thing to me personally. But I also saw the evolution of what AI is today and what the ideas it can be. So it's kind of endless when it comes to design and creating a character. You know? But this one right here, to just get back to the story, is that the first one he loved, but then he started to see mechanical aspects. You know, he saw how it was segmented together, and he was like, you know, I think that 2,000 years in the future, these things would probably not build themselves like you think of robots building themselves, but actually grow. You know, almost like a human would. It was like, or in some kind of a cell, like a generator of some sort. So that's where we ended up evolving. And every time I did an iteration, he was like, "That's cool, but I see mechanical parts in it. I don't want to see mechanical parts, but I want it to feel like a robot," which is a challenge. And then we got to the last one, which was all kind of flowing together. And this is the one that's in the movie. And a lot of this was an interesting thing for me as a designer too, because I was so used to thinking about a design and overthinking it. What was great about the computer is I was able to experiment. I would throw a texture, like the texture that's on the arms that wrap up. It looks like this in the movie, but this is based on just me throwing another texture. And this particular one was the headlight of a car. And the way that the grid of a headlight is, it's like, and it wrapped around at this time it was not polygons, but it was NURBS. And so it had its own UVs, and it would just wrap itself around, and it was like, oh, that's cool. So I used it, and then the inside was the city lights. You know, I created like, you know, just tons of city lights inside of an object inside. But it's fascinating. That's why this one to me is an important one. I saw the evolution, but also, it was the beginning of me as a designer in this new world.
And never stop exploring and take chances. I mean, that's really what Aaron's saying is, if he just stopped and just did what he knew, it would only go a certain way. He never stops, hey, let's try this. This might be interesting. Even, you know, what is that saying? Every wrong is a right. Yeah. Right? You try something, it doesn't work, you try something else.
Is that the saying?
I don't know.
Has anybody heard that saying?
That's his saying.
That's my saying. It's a Michaelism.
And then this is kind of down that same path as well, very briefly, because we want to get into masterclass. But same thing, showing the evolution of Gort from Day the Earth Stood Still, where it started in one direction, completely went in a completely different direction, then kind of came back. I mean, any quick tidbits on it?
Yeah. So this is the progression above. So starting up at the top left is where it started, which was, basically making this character, have a humanoid appearance was important to the director. But he wanted it to be very unique in its shape. So it was this, very unique, like almost like it had its own culture, it was involved with it. Then it moved past that to where it was like, no, let's forget that whole thing. Let's actually make it to where it's like, feels not human at all. Maybe it's more alien or more creature-like, like an insect. So that's the next stage. And this is all the same character. And then it evolved down to, going back to humanoid. And then we got the call from the fans that knew the movie was coming out, and they said, well, I hope that, they make Gort look like the original Gort, because otherwise I won't, I'll be very disappointed. So with that, and it's amazing because that really influences the studios. The studios hear this, and they hear these are the people that are going to see their movie. So they changed, the design, and that's where we started to go down, and it was the first stage where the one, with the kind of slit through its eyes and stuff was the first one I did in that direction. Then it just became maybe ones that were more like, still humanoid. then it slowly evolved, and maybe there was more mechanical or intricate parts to the armor, and then it became this simple shape, which is very close to the original movie. But it's amazing that a film, and this is like just a few of the designs. There was, I think, thousands through the process. So that's a quick brief of just two major movies with AI that was like in that, and the evolution of how it took from an idea from a script and how it evolved and how it can change, as you're going. So it's kind of like a good illustration of and that's things that we look at back, when we work on stuff. Like if we get a similar script that has a similar type of character, we think, okay, now what are we going to do that's different that we didn't do in the other one? So we try to evolve as designers as well.
And then going back to Masterclass, we had, like I said, Kyle, who's a teacher here at Gnomon, kind of start sketching out basic ideas for the robot that we wanted to cast in this short that we're making for Masterclass. We're making, like I said, we're doing the whole thing from script to short, making the entire thing and then teaching the process along the way. And so he started off with these sketches, and Aaron really liked this one in the bottom right, and kind of went from there.
Yeah, the basic thing is that this is the script that we went with, the story, which is a short that we're, like Steffen said, we're going to shoot it. We have an actor that's going to play, not the robot, but a character, a kid that this is his kind of, this is his protector or big brother or something like that. It's almost like an Iron Giant type of idea that we're going with. And it's kind of this military thing, but it should feel intimidating, but also he's made it into this, this fun brother, I guess, kind of a thing where you'll see as we move even further on, when we start to build it, this is the modeling phase after we decide which sketch to go. So this is the model, the grayscale.
And Olson here was was kind of lead look dev on this, making this, what looks like a football player, come to life.
Yeah, so...
You want to chat about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was doing a lot of look dev on this guy, and we wanted to do, I kind of went in the direction of, it's a repurposed robot. So its initial function was not, it wasn't battle ready, it wasn't for war and everything. Because, with this texture job, how many war machines do you see with these caution lights on the back? So that kind of stuff is what I was aiming at. And I was looking at a lot of large-scale farming equipment and looking at the way that down around the feet, the pistons would get all dirty and kind of grunged up, as opposed to the top, where it was more, the damage was in reference to battle. So I did a lot of research on that kind of stuff, and I played a lot with the idea of the difference between painted metal as opposed to functioning metal. So looking at cars, and you have a nice paint job on a car, but the undercarriage is purely for function, and kind of designating what aspects of it were for aesthetically pleasing ideas as opposed to full on just taking a beating or doing a process that it was built for.
And do you want to talk about the stamps and all the kid-friendly stuff on it?
Absolutely. So this character is supposed to be, taking care of this young girl in a post-apocalyptic wasteland. And so this idea of the robot being an older brother figure to this young girl, and essentially watching her grow up and all this stuff. So the idea of her growing up, and as she gets older, putting stickers, putting that pink bow on the skull, and all that kind of stuff, gives a robot which has very little humanity, kind of this human feel, and makes it show that it's a loved object rather than just a shell.
That's great. And then we've got, the gun, again, the weapons, talking about every aspect of this character needs to be fleshed out and thought of in terms of the functionality of the weapon it uses and how it works and how it operates.
Why?
Yeah, and this is, in the class, we're going to talk about the aspects. You saw the design, and this is also another aspect of designing, which is, coming up with not only a pencil sketch of like an overall view, but actually building an asset that is, that we all kind of like the basic shape from a sketch. And now it's applying like textures, different looks, and these are, we'll talk about those aspects of when you're designing something, of how you can repurpose, a design and to get many different designs that have many different feels with it, and by using, 3D opposed to just having to paint it from scratch on each one.
And so again, as we've shown you in our process, again, once we've identified the character, the concept, the model, we go into what's the action happening in the scene, and that's everything that we're creating, we're writing. So this is a glimpse of some of the initial storyboards that we've mapped out in terms of the action we want to see, the interplay between kind of our human character and the robot. We won't reveal too much, so we don't want to spoil kind of the final surprise. And again, this is all still in process, so it's something we're going to be kind of completing and finishing over the next few months, leading up to the master class, which is going to take place in March.
And it's us sharing our process, what we do feel really works of solidifying a story and locking it down before you shoot.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is, what's important in the entire process too is doing all these stages, for an understanding that this is an important, key scene for this short that we're developing, because it's kind of the show. It's to help illustrate the protector of this child, and how this child is not in fear of this robot, but actually it's protecting the robot, and it helps this whole image of like the world, the relationship, and so this is the most important key scene for us to try to figure out and design. But there's many others that in a film that would have important parts like this, and that's why we chose this particular one.
And of course, the next part is starting to bring it to life, and we're in those early stages right now. But Erik is leading that charge, and we're going to show you some of the the rigging and animation he's working on. Calisthenics, it looks like.
I was very tempted to have him break dance, but I didn't get a chance to.
But so as an animator, what do you look for in a nice rig, and how does that change? How does the rigging change the emotion that you can bring to it?
Well, with this, I think this is like one of the first, or maybe the only robot I've animated so far, and I didn't know what to expect or what to ask for, because you want things like, your instinct is like blend. I want some sweet blend shapes, and some sweet ass muscle deforms. But I think it's kind of been interesting and a little bit liberating not to have to think about that stuff, and to be able to have the rig. It basically, by looking at it, you can tell what it can do because the joints are there.
Right. So, as the difference between organic and mechanical animation, like the difference between when you were animating on Stranger Things versus now animating something, like trying to bring personality to something that is inanimate.
I think that is the kind of the challenge, is to, because there's no squash or stretch, and you can't. So I think that's kind of what's I think is going to be interesting about this, is giving it this inorganic thing, an organic feel, and kind of an emotion and a soul to it.
Right.
I think that's what an animator should be able to do.
Well, and this is one of the walk cycles that we did as early testing as we were walking through this process once again that Keefer animated. But the concept, kind of stealing a little bit from it kind of looks like Ed 209 and that kind of stuff.
The most important thing initially I thought of was weight. It has to be heavy and massive, and it has to be imposing. And so that's what I spend a lot of time doing. That's what I tend to do a walk cycle for just about every character I animate. It's a good way of getting it, because if you can get a personality in just a walk, that's a really good head start as far as figuring the character out. And every character has a surprisingly distinctive walk cycle.
So, again, this is kind of just a glimpse of what we've been building, and, this is going to give you a sense of all the other different disciplines that go into our pipeline that we're going to be completing and showcasing in our masterclass. Again, at the top there's the dates, but, again, this is built to be, we're taking ourselves through this entire process, and we're going to be sharing it and breaking it down every step of the way for you guys.
It's really taking what we've learned, and when Aaron started in, was it 2005? And, his 35 years, my 25 years, Steffan's 10 years of learning what great directors like and use. And we saw films tonight from Apes to Wonder Woman when they really put a package together. So we've taken what we've learned over all the years and we're put it into this class to help you guys and share with you what we've learned, what really works.
And empower you to build your own process. Doesn't have to be exactly like what we do on a day-to-day, but knowing all the tools and elements in the pipeline hopefully will empower you to bring your own concepts and projects to life as well. So, with that, hopefully you guys enjoyed it. This is something that, again, the site is now live for the first time today, so we hope that many of you will join us and come visit us at the studio, take the workshop and learn our workflow. And with that, I think that's a bit of a wrap, yeah?
Yeah.
I'm going to go to Q&A after this. So thank you all so much for coming out.
Thank you. Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys. That was amazing. So many secrets. I feel naughty that I know so much. Do we have any questions? And I'll bring the mic round, you guys.
Oh, one in the back.
Yeah.
Two in the back.
Oh, sorry. You were...
Don't be shy.
Hi, the rig for the robot, was it a bunch of set-driven keys that you use?
As of right now, well, I'm sure there are a ton, because every bit of geo has to be functional and has to work with the rig. So there's a bunch. It's pretty incredible. Like if you get in and look at the joints, they're all functional and they all work. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I think that's one of the true difficulties. I mean, it's actually a lot easier to do creatures and soft organic characters because you can kind of squish a little bit every once in a while and you can kind of cheat. Whereas with something like a robot, like with RL7 from Archetype, and with something like this guy, all the pistons have to fit exactly, and you can't cheat because as soon as you do, one slips out and you see it, and it doesn't take like a good eye to see it break. So yeah, everything has to be perfectly fit. Which means that a lot of your movements are rigidly directional, so you can't quite bend it.
Thank you.
All right, and there was someone else. Okay.
You were talking about, for some of the concepts that you'll go through, 40, 50, 100 different versions of it. How do you keep your editorial eye sharp enough to know what to hold on to, what to get rid of, what's working? How do you stay a course through that?
The question is again, how do we save what? I'm sorry.
When you have, you were talking about like the island, like there were like 20, 25 versions of that island. As you're going through all of those different versions, how do you apply your editorial to that to get to something in the end? How do you keep yourself on a kind of a guide rail?
Well, I think that a lot of it is coming from the director's point of view. It's like we internally we'll explore stuff, especially at the beginning. We explore so many different ranges, and then it's one of those that starts to hone in based on the director's choices, and from there, then we can start to like eliminate things in that process that obviously aren't working, so we know where to keep focusing until we actually hit that mark.
And a lot of it is, it comes down to experience. When you sit in enough rooms with enough directors and enough producers, you kind of get an emotional feel for what they're looking for. But beyond that, like you learn to listen really carefully to the words that they use and the emotional intonations that they're referring to when they're talking about the design, and then that kind of gives you the metadata that you can kind of scrape what you want from. Very rarely will they say, "I want a pink monster with purple dots." It's usually much more. It's usually much more finesse, and it's usually a little more philosophical than that. And I think that's where the challenge comes in, is converting philosophy to actual visual graphics.
And it's helpful to have a very talented director to work with who has vision.
Oh yeah, I will say that the more specific they are, the easier it is, of course.
Yeah, that definitely makes it easier. I think that the one thing is, what I've known over the years is not to ever take anything personal. As designers, it's hard because you may actually fall in love with something and you don't understand why a director may not like it. But that's not really any of the artist's position. We're here to serve the director's vision and help realize it. So it's understanding and getting past that a lot of times too. Like if you have like a choice, like you even want to try to push a direction down because you really want them to see what you're seeing. It's not important. So that's a little bit of advice just as far as designers trying to really push their own kind of ideas. I think that what's great about what we try to do is get that creative outlet at the beginning out, and then you wait for the feedback. And when you hear the feedback, it's like, okay, well, my idea wasn't, for this film, I guess, but maybe I could use it for another one or something.
Well, and that's one thing that we'll do as a house, because we have so many talented artists. When we do first start a job, whether the client is paying for the entire team to be on it or not, we'll throw the entire team on it. Everybody gets a shot at it, because you never know whose design is going to be by happenstance. They pick that design, and that's the direction that you run in now for 2 months, trying to refine it and turn it into an asset, and then eventually take it to full visual effects. It's a little bit of a shotgun approach initially, and then you kind of hone from there.
But that makes us unique at ASC, because we're able, with our talent pool, is give a director a lot of different flavors from different artists that's unique from each artist, where a lot of times they'll just hire an artist for that production and they just work together. And like Steffen said, we initially will do a shotgun approach, which gives each artist opinion and a chance to show something different, and gives this director all these different flavors.
And sometimes what will happen is you'll end up getting a director who said, ooh, I really like the form and shape of this one, but I really like the spikes on this one, but I really like the glowing lights on this one. And then we'll kind of mix and merge and blend and push. And it kind of goes back to the original point that the team has to move as a team. Because if one person's design gets picked, but then somebody else then starts working on it, it can cause a little bit of friction. So when everybody's moving in the same direction with the same goal in mind, you end up coming up with something that is truly a product of teamwork and teamwork alone.
Okay, do we have any more? Yes? Okay, awesome.
Hi, I'm George Harris, and my first question would be, bringing it back to the project you're working on, Embodied. What were some of the challenges you faced when pitching this idea? I remember you stated that working together, highlighting your strengths, which is, basically coming up with a concept art and presenting a visual to anyone who you're pitching it to. But what were some of the things that you faced while in that room?
As far as the limitations, or as far as the pitch? Well, the pitch, a lot of it was when it was brought to me, the original idea, and it was originally we were to help, ASC was to help kind of rethink the zombie aspect of what these creatures were, because it was something that wasn't, it's kind of, even though Walking Dead's very, popular, and well, it's hard to make a movie these days with just zombies. So a lot of ideas came out early on, and part of it, I wanted to become something, do something that felt original, but it's hard to be original when there's thousands of ideas that's already been done, and they're all great, that I'm a big fan of. So part of it is thinking about the things that I was inspired to, and like Aliens, and, I think that The Thing, and a lot of these other movies that influenced me when I was younger, and pitching those ideas, I think those were, and a lot of the times with pitching them is I had to pitch them with a concept in mind. Some of it is, if you go pitch it verbally, then it may just, may not come across exactly right. But if you pitch it, you go, hey, I have an idea, and here it is, and then you kind of talk about it. It helps that process. And that was with the producers that came on board that approached our team. And once I got past that phase, I was like, in as a producer and a director on it, because they didn't have that director attached. So I was developing it with them. And now as we developed it, we have, a complete package that you've seen here, but there's a lot more. There's a script. We actually have a 3D print that's a lot bigger than this of our alien. And that's all going to be, as we go to pitches, that helps sell it.
And wasn't there if I remember right, everything's a process, and we even did go down the road of trying to understand the zombie-esque thing for a couple of weeks or months, and then we kind of tossed it out because we said it was just kind of overdone.
Yeah, there's a little of that, but I mean, they kind of came to us in a lot of ways of like, how can you rethink the zombies in a way that hasn't been done, and so it was a short, brief amount of like, coming up with, a unique zombie. I mean, there's some great zombie concepts in video games too that I think have been done really well and creative that I haven't even seen in movies yet. But those, you don't want to take from those because it's already done. So coming up with just a different method, I think, and what they were, and also giving it an origin. Why is it happening in Texas? And given all these reasons, we're a way to justify, some of the choices.
It's really, it really comes down to this process of sitting with it and digesting it, and it's never really overnight. It is definitely a process, and be patient with it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any more in the stage? No? We have a few online. So first of all, let's go with, so one of our Facebook Live viewers tonight would like to know, this might be hard to answer, they'd like to know how much of the work in your sketch-to-screen process typically ends up in the films. Can you answer that?
Well, it's an interesting question because it generally depends on the film. So, I mean, the first misconception is that everything that goes into production actually gets made, and I would say 99% of stuff that ends up getting kind of production funds just never ends up seeing the light of day. I would say probably 90% of the work that we've done over the last 10 years you will never see. And not just designs that are on films that you'll never see, but like whole films that we've realized all the way through in the design side that will just never happen. So even with that in mind, the ones that do happen, there is still that same development process. So it's, in the end, it's a very fine amount of the work that we do that ends up coming to the screen. It does help, though, with, for instance, things like Stranger Things. We were on very early with the Duffers and designed with them very early, and we pushed and pulled with them a little bit more creatively than we usually do with clients. So we ended up having a little bit more control over that one, which was really nice because we ended up seeing, we ended up kind of pushing some of our ideas a bit more and really seeing that baby come to life.
Yeah, I think that part of that too is if you have a filmmaker that is really interested in hearing new ideas, and that's what we try to do with the sketch-to-screen process, is really think it out all the way through from the very beginning. Like when we're designing something, we're thinking about the end result, and then we explain that to the filmmaker. We say, this is what we're thinking, based on what we heard from you, and this is how we feel it could be applied. And if it resonates with them, then we move forward really quickly. If it's a process that has to be, kind of like continuing to evolve, then that can take a little longer. But so it's always different with different clients.
Mm-hmm.
Well, but for instance, and then kicking it back to The Mist, 100% of that made it to the screen because there was no time for them to have any kind of design choices. So yeah, there was no option. The guys whipped out some badass art, and then we made it.
Yeah,
that was all there was to it.
So the answer is about 15 minutes.
That's awesome. Okay, any more questions on the stage? I'll go to another online one. So from Jonathan Hernandez, watching on live stream tonight, this goes back to the War for the Planet of the Apes stuff. So when you're designing, creatures like the apes and that, does knowing who the actor is going to be influence your design process?
In a lot of projects it does. For the apes, it really didn't. Caesar was designed way before Andy Serkis was even involved. it was like, we were involved the early days when the script was first being developed, and like I said early on, that there was no idea of the final results of how it was going to be done, if it was going to be a guy in a suit, puppet, or visual effects, until after the design was completed. Even the new, like Bad Ape, we didn't know who was going to play that character, and the choice was amazing. But it's one that some projects we actually do, it does help influence it, especially if it's going to be like a character that character has to come through. But for Apes, it really wasn't.
Well, on the flip, maybe this is off.
It's on, they'll turn it. He'll turn it up, yeah, it's fine.
Hello?
You turn it off.
On the flip side, as I was saying, on the flip side, with Apes, that was obviously the case, but one thing you guys do quite a bit of is photo bashing, right? So, I've seen you incorporate an actual actor's face that might be suggested by the director or envisioned by the studio and kind of design on top of that. So you're getting a very clear picture of that actor in that reimagined character role or look.
Yeah, I mean, there is in certain design projects, not Apes, but where there's going to be prosthetics on an actor, or it's going to be a digital character that has to look like that actor. Then there is a lot of that influence of knowing what that actor is going to be early on. Like in Pirates, when we were doing Pirates, it's obviously a lot of the actors that were involved with that we maintained through the design.
Yeah, and they even said before the design process ever began that they wanted Javier Bardem. And actually, a lot of times what will happen is on a lot of different projects, they'll say, hey, we haven't locked an actor yet, but we're talking to this actor, this actor, this actor, and this actor. Can you do effectively the same designs, but with a spread of actors? And what's interesting is you kind of see the different personalities that brings almost immediately, and you kind of watch, the different directions the film could take had they picked another actor and gone a different route.
That's so interesting. And one more question on live stream, and then if anyone has a last question, put your hands up. So from Laura watching on Facebook Live, she'd like to know what's the most effective way to get into the VFX industry, and what are the main qualities or skills that people like you are looking for when hiring?
Go to Gnomon.
Solid one, yeah.
Thank you.
Really learn the tools. I mean, both Aaron and I came from traditional backgrounds, and that would be actually my biggest comment, which would be learn the traditional. Make sure you understand the art, because you can make yourself a technician, but if you don't know what you're aiming for when you start, you're going to miss every time. Really learn the technicals and use that to put together a really dramatic looking reel.
Yeah, I mean, putting together a really strong reel that's unique in your abilities is important. And there's so many different avenues, self-promotion is really important to get recognized. So doing as much promoting of your work online, blogs, any of that stuff, then creating your own website, there's all that stuff helps, as far as getting noticed. And then, and just kind of reach out. If you're interested in a particular company, you have to have something to show. So you have to start there, and then you reach out to a company like ours or any of the other companies that are available out there. And the first thing we do is look at reels.
Yeah, it's really building your tool set. Either you start with Gnomon, and you get your experience, and then you take a master class, or just something that.
Good luck.
But no, honestly, as your tool belt needs to grow over time, you can't be a master carpenter with one tool, right? You just can't, and you need to keep on adding. And I will say, everybody on our team, from Aaron on down, still learns every day. There isn't one day that they don't learn. I mean, we were working on something just the other day, and Aaron was saying, hey, this would be really interesting to try this for this character. And it amazes me that, Aaron with 35 years, Steffen with 10, they're still open, they're not closed off to learning, and they keep on trying different new things to push themselves. So I hope we answered that question. I think we...
Yeah, that was great. Thank you. So last chance, people here. I can see a hand. Awesome. I'm going to just run through.
What was going through your guys' heads when creating the Demogorgon?
Yeah.
Well, that one's an interesting one because the Duffers didn't really give us a ton to work with. They said they wanted it to be bipedal. They wanted it to walk on two legs because they wanted to keep it guy in a suit, 80s creature film. And they said they wanted it to have a lot of teeth. And Aaron even did some of the first sketches of the Demogorgon.
Yeah, I mean, we were really lucky again because it was with a director that gave us so much freedom, and the only thing that really like to add to Steffen's being a bipedal and is that it needed to have a mouth that would eat people but had no face. So that was the things that we were left with, and some of the first designs were like, how do you make a something that is just teeth or but also has to be able to close and open and all that stuff. So it only took a few designs to get to this kind of flowery face, but luckily it's become something that's very unique and iconic in its sense. But what's so great is that there's a part of it too that makes it kind of special is that there's a human element to this whole thing. Having it to where it's relatable. So when this whole thing closes up, it can look like some tall, lanky person, but then when it opens up, it's something that's really terrifying. So we feel very fortunate, but as far as like some of the inspirations too is one of our other presentations we went through this. We didn't do it today, but there was a lot of like we look at a lot of real things. So there's a snapping turtle inside its mouth. It doesn't really have teeth, but it has all these like little things that look like teeth inside there, and it's a lot of it was inspired. For the inside of the mouth, because when the snapping turtle opens its mouth, it's very terrifying. If you just Google snapping turtle's mouth, it may remind you of the Demogorgon.
Did it scare you watching it? No.
He hasn't seen it, but he knows all about it, I promise you. All right. He actually has an idea that he's going to pitch to you later, Aaron, so we'll introduce you guys.
Well, I'd love to hear it.
Season 3. All right, so if we don't have any more questions, we have just enough time to wrap things up and do the raffle, so let's have a big round of applause.